Hello, everyone, for the first episode of whatever we're going to end up calling this. Today, we're going to be talking about the original Planet of the Apes film, the 1968 one, starring Charlton Heston. I was inspired to talk about this film because I saw a bunch of other people talking about it, and I got the idea that maybe it's more interesting and has more to say than just the twist ending, which was always the impression I got before, never having actually seen the movie. And so we saw it, and it definitely is interesting and worth talking about. I'm Lars, and Blade will be my co-host.
Yo.
All right, so let's just get right into it.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was.
You want to say something?
Oh yeah. I was surprised about it because I don't know. I always had the impression I haven't really watched many old movies from this era, and I'd always got the impression that they were very boring from the one or two I had seen. But it was a very engaging movie.
It flew by, didn't it?
It did. It was what is it? Nearly 2 hours, hour and a half, something.
Let me check what the if it should have the runtime here somewhere. I have the Wikipedia page open. Let me see if I can find the runtime. It doesn't say, but I feel like it was 2.5 hours, something like that.
An hour and 52 minutes was the running time.
Okay, that's less than I thought. I keep on getting confused with the way they count that, but yeah, still,
Yes.
it didn't feel that long.
No, it didn't. It really didn't.
Yeah.
I was also surprised that even though it's an hour and 52 minutes, not particularly much happens.
The pivotal plot beats, there aren't that many of them, but yet just the dialogue and the process of watching the events unfold is, very engaging.
Yeah. I mean, another thing I also thought was very good about it was, well, especially with a lot of older movies I have seen, there's a lot less music, in a lot of the scenes.
Yes, in a lot of modern films, Christopher Nolan is particularly lambasted for this. The sound effects and music are far too loud, far too common, and it's hard to get a grasp on what the characters are saying. And it's very assaulting and confusing a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I usually don't notice music much in movies, just for the fact that it's often just in the background. But especially with the older movies that don't have music as much, it's far more jarring when it comes on. So
yeah,
it
really hits, and it
does.
provides a great boost to the scene. There's one particular famous memeified moment, which we should probably get to later when we get to the scene by scene analysis as we go through the film. But when the score kicks in at that moment, it really does hit. So if we're going to go scene by scene from the start, the film opens with 4 astronauts, but the one being played by Charlton Heston, who's the main character, Taylor, he's the only one who's not in cryostasis at the moment. The others are Stewart, Landon, and Dodge, and they're all in this spaceship, and Charlton Heston's character, Taylor, is speaking into a recorder, talking in a rather lackadaisical, devil-may-care attitude about something very serious and impressive that they're doing. He's talking about how they're going out into the cosmos to explore a new planet, and it'll be 2,000 years or more from when they left. So everyone that he knew will be dead, but this is to anyone who's still alive, if there are any, back on Earth. And I just wanted to know if back home they're still just killing each other for no good reason.
There's not necessarily something to do with the movie, but something I always thought was interesting about the way they designed the sets especially back in that era, was I think especially with modern movies, there's so much to do with like, oh, that doesn't quite make sense. That's not realistic. But especially back in those times, they just sort of like made sets that looked cool.
Yeah.
And like the cryopod stasis are just literally like beds that they sleep in. That has like a closing door on it.
Yeah. And this is the part of the film which I found most interesting, and which I had found the least talked about in my watching and reading of what other people have said about the film, which is Taylor's character. So, as I said, he's talking about the fact that everyone back home is going to be long dead by now, because due to timey-wimey theory of relativity stuff, they're going to be traveling thousands of years into the future on this journey. But he doesn't seem to be that cut up about it or consider it to be that monumental. He's just casually talking about it in a sly way as he's smoking without a care in the world. And the other part of his character, which is important, is the fact that he doesn't have a very high opinion of human beings. He thinks that we're a violent, sort of short-sighted kind of people that just kill each other for no reason. And he's going, human beings suck. Yeah, that's sort of his attitude.
Mm.
But he gets into the cryopods, and you mentioned that you found these simple, so just sort of covered beds to, in a way, look cooler, or at least it was a nice change of pace from the way cryo chambers are usually portrayed nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, I like it mostly because like they're on a spaceship going for like thousands of years unattended, and instead of having like these trying to add some like science, like some science behind it, it's just like these are cryopods. They cryopod people.
I mean, a lot of that's probably budget.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, for sure.
But I mean, I suppose it's that thing of the movie itself. Like, I occasionally feel like those they try to put in like some scientific like dialogue, just trying to make it seem believable. But I know that sometimes takes me out of it, because I mean, why would these people need explaining what the cryopod was? Or
there's another scene toward the end of the film which has a similar thing going on, where it doesn't feel like it would make sense technically for this to be the case, but it didn't take me out of the film at all, because I knew what point it was making and what the things that were being presented were meant to represent, and so I just went with it. In some ways, the film almost seems like a play at times.
Yeah, that's what I felt as well.
Where certain things are meant to be a certain way, and you just go with it without worrying about the fact that it doesn't look totally realistic and isn't completely explained about how the nitty-gritty of all the technical aspects of everything works.
Yeah.
But anyway, after a indeterminate amount of time has passed, we don't know exactly how long, Taylor wakes up, and there's a no. I don't actually remember if there was exactly, but
I think it was just flooding water, wasn't there?
well, no, the flooding water doesn't happen immediately, but I don't quite remember if there's an alarm sound going. But there's a figurative alarm sound going, even if there isn't a literal one, as they're crashing down quite fast toward a lake. And he wakes up as it smashes into the lake and quickly begins to fill with water. And the other two male astronauts and him wake up as well. They discover that the female astronaut has her cryopod has cracked and she's withered away like a husk. So they get out the supplies that they need and they bail out of the spaceship as it fills with water and then sinks as they paddle away. And we get more characterization from Taylor, where he copes with the fact that one of their crew members is dead very quickly, He's like, whatever, she's dead. Whereas one of the other ones, Landon, acts in a more human and normal way in that he's upset by it.
Yeah.
And we get characterization throughout the film of Taylor that he's kind of an insensitive jerk of a human being, not super commendable.
Yeah.
Which I think works for the film, though, and the point it's trying to make.
I think it does, yeah. The thing also that surprised me about it, which I normally like in a modern movie, I think is very boring, but a lot of it is like them marching, so them walking.
Yeah.
But sort of just like sort of cuts with them getting to new areas and just keep on walking.
Yeah. There's a bunch of walking at the start of the film, but again, somehow I didn't find it boring.
No.
They land. The place that they've landed in is this barren, rocky Badlands kind of place that looks quite alien. And they land on the shore of the lake. They take stock of their provisions. They have a gun and some food and water that can last them for a while. And Landon gets out a US flag and plants it in the soil, which causes Taylor to overreact in a hilarious way. He turns and laughs mockingly and loudly at this. So Landon is trying to maintain a bit of patriotism here and like we're claiming this for our people, and Taylor is just think, ha! The US is long dead. Remember, it's 2,000 years. Ha ha ha.
I did think that was quite a good. I mean, it definitely shows that he doesn't really have much. I suppose loyalty is not the right thing, but like
he doesn't have
sentimentality.
Attachments,
no, yeah.
which he explicitly says is why he left Earth. He didn't have anything
left
that he cared about there, so why not leave and have everything that you know turn to dust? It's not a big deal to him, or at least it isn't right now. It's not at the moment. We'll see if that changes. Haha. So then, as you said, we have an extended sequence of them just walking through the Badlands, trying to get somewhere, and we have little bits of dialogue as we go, which just hammer home the theme more. Where Landon, particularly, is upset. He's struggling to cope a bit. He's finding the whole thing traumatic, which is again very normal and kind of the reaction you'd expect to have. And Taylor's just poo-pooing and making fun of him the whole time. And for instance, this one section where Landon is saying, "Oh, stop, just leave me alone, please." And going, "Yeah, everyone's dead, haha."
Yeah, I thought that was. I mean, at this point in the movie, I really did not like Taylor's character, and I think that does seem to be kind of the point, that you're not meant to like him.
Yeah. So after an indeterminate amount of time traveling, again, we're not quite sure how long this is, but
well, they say they have 2 days worth of food.
No, isn't it three weeks?
Oh, yeah, 3 weeks worth of food and water.
I don't remember exactly how much it is. 2 weeks, maybe, something like that. They have a few weeks, I think. But there's various cuts and showing them becoming more disheveled, which give the indication that's at least many days have passed as they travel through these Badlands. Yeah. Until eventually they get to this place which they see as scarecrows, overshadowing this pass to a different place. And once you discover more about what's going on later on in the film, you could probably guess what those scarecrows are there for. But they charge on into those scarecrows and they see that there's things growing past here. There's trees and grass, and they're obviously overjoyed by this. And then they encounter a waterfall and a stream and like a pond of flowing water underneath this waterfall. And they react in a way which I don't know whether to feel like this is sort of contrived stupidity or whether this is understandable, considering that they've been walking out in the dust and hot for so long. But they all immediately strip off and leave all their important gear on the bank and
Okay,
start swimming in the water.
I can kind of get it if you're super hot and like you just really want to cool down. But the one thing which I do find slightly like contrived is the fact that they get to the pool all together, and then they separate and strip down and put their piles in different areas around the pond. Like if you
Yeah.
were really desperate to get in the water, you think your clothes were wet. I don't know. I just didn't.
Well,
felt
the behavior of these guys, this mess up here, combined with the fact that they're apparently meant to go colonize another planet, I think, with 4 people and only 1 woman, ties into a fan theory that I have, which is that this whole expedition's a boondoggle. It's a Potemkin spaceship. Basically, they're not meant to survive and actually achieve anything. NASA had to make it look like they were doing something, and so they shot these 4 dupes out into space. I don't know.
I mean, that actually makes quite a bit of sense because, I mean, if you were going to want them to settle another planet, I mean, it could have been on the ship, but you should feel like you'd have more stuff. Like, what the thing I found always the weirdest part was it was a spaceship that was designed for re-entry, but it was not designed to land in water.
Yeah, it was.
Which is where most modern day things are designed to land in water, not just crash into the ground.
Yeah, I mean things have clearly gone wrong. But
I know, but
yeah,
they specifically say in the movie we hadn't programmed to land in water. Also, my one other criticism, which is not that big of a deal, their pistol is in their backpack.
Yeah.
Which for carrying I understand, but you'd think you'd want to put a holster in there so once you get planet side, you can then get the pistol out and keep it on your hip.
Yeah. And you would think that they'd take turns to jump into the water and have one guy standing with the pistol guarding their stuff, keeping a lookout. But again, there's a degree of the fact that they've been walking through the hot for days and days that would make them acting stupidly somewhat understandable, because as would be expected, their clothes and gear get nabbed by some local savages, and they have to jump out of the water, grab what clothes they can that are left, and chase after these, whoever they are. And they end up discovering that these are some kind of primitive human beings, and they chase them to where they see these primitive human beings are all hanging out in this melon orchard with corn and other things growing. And of course, they're confused as to why humans are there. And Taylor, immediately the cynical power grabber, says, "Wow, this is all the human race has to offer here. We'll be kings before long."
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a very it's very telling for his personality.
Yes.
That instead of going, "Oh, I wonder why all these people are primitive and running around in loincloths and stuff," he's like, "Well, get all the power for myself."
And then, before they can plot their takeover, though, a whole bunch of humanoid gorillas ride in on horseback, start firing rifles at the people, making them beating sticks to make them run for it, trapping them in nets, driving them into pits, beating them on the head. And this introductory scene of the apes, particularly the gorillas, will be emblematic of the entire film, where the gorillas act in a rather goofy and inefficient way in their handling of their human enemies.
Though I will say, the design of the rifle the gorillas use, very cool.
Yes.
It was a modified M1 carbine that had the art director had just, I think his art director, had just created a custom wooden cover for it.
Right,
Stock.
interesting.
So, and they just made a whole bunch of, for like the background characters, they just made a whole bunch of wooden replicas. So some of them were M1 carbines covered with a wooden cover over it, and some were just straight up just wood.
Yeah. So, of course, our 3 astronauts get caught up in this hunt. Dodge, the black astronaut, gets killed. We don't see quite what happens to Landon, but he gets either killed or captured as well. And Taylor gets shot in the throat, and then he blacks out. But he ends up waking up, being captured with the rest of the apes, having surgery done on him to keep him alive. But because his throat's hurt, he can't speak. Another sort of impossibility that's passed over for the purposes of telling the story, in that all the apes speak English.
Yeah.
But again, that's fine. That's not a big deal to me. And we first meet Dr. Zira.
Yes.
A female chimpanzee who's immediately spots that there's something different about Taylor. She calls him bright eyes and sees that he's not quite the same as the rest of the dumb humans that these intelligent apes have been driving out and capturing.
I do want to say something though that I did notice. There's like a weird hierarchy to the whole ape.
Yeah, it's not ever mentioned. It's left in the background. It's obviously there, but again, it's never actually mentioned.
All the soldiers are gorillas.
Yeah.
All the regular civilians are chimpanzees, and all the high religious governmental leaders are
orangutans.
Orangutans, which I thought was interesting.
Yes. I don't know if that was in the book or not. I haven't read the book. I think it's quite different. So, but yeah, it'd be interesting to know which parts were changed from the film to the book, or the other way around. Dr. Zira is immediately like, "Wow, that's cool. This guy, he clearly looks like he's trying to speak." She immediately has the idea that she wants this special human to reproduce. So she puts a primitive human woman in with Taylor, which we assume Taylor doesn't mind. I don't know, we don't really get his reaction to it. It's kind of left unclear exactly how he feels about it, but he seems to care for her later, I suppose. Again, it's hard to tell.
I always thought it was
with Taylor sometimes.
It was interesting though, I thought, because I don't know if this was just because of filming and things, but there was only one other female primitive human you see.
No, there were
more.
There were others. They were just hard to spot because they all look dirty and the same.
Yeah. I do also want to mention the hilarity of the I don't know if it's prosthetics or something, but the way the gorillas move are quite funny to me.
Yeah, they sort of have a slightly bow-legged look to them, and they do look goofy as they approach. And there's one scene in particular where one of them has some club, and he spins it in his hand, getting ready to bonk Taylor.
Yeah.
The gorillas are just hilarious and great fun whenever they're on screen. The way there's many scenes of them I was going to say manhandling, but really it's,
ape handling
Taylor or some of the other humans, spraying them with water, bopping them on the head, beating them, throwing nooses around their necks, and the way they do it in their mostly incompetent, over-the-top way is very funny. But Taylor is then taken outside, and Zira tries to get the religious leader defender of the faith, as well as head scientist, bigwig Dr. Zaius, to have a look at Taylor. And she says, look, he's trying to speak. He's a big deal. And Taylor is, of course, desperate to prove this as well. He starts writing in the dirt, and then some of the other primitive humans start covering over his writing, and so they get into a fight. And so the gorillas drag him out of there. And then one of the other gorillas is talking to Dr. Zaius and says, what's Dr. Zaius trying to prove anyway? And Dr. Zaius says that man can be domesticated. And they both go, ha, 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 ha. But we see that Dr. Zaius spots the remainder of the writing on the ground, and he covers it over, which is some obvious foreshadowing that Dr. Zaius isn't just some prominent ape figure that believes humans are inherently incapable of higher reasoning, and that's why they need to treat them that way. He knows on some level that's not the case, but he's continuing to hold the position he does, and continuing to be skeptical and threatening toward Dr. Zira and what she's trying to prove despite this.
Yeah, though I never ended up disliking Dr. Zaius though, which I thought.
No, I thought he was a very interesting character. Yeah.
I mean, I know there's the whole thing about a likable villain, but I never really thought of him as a villain.
No, I didn't think of him as a villain either. Anyway, earlier, Taylor had tried to grab the notebook off Dr. Zira in a very violent way, which didn't do him any favors, and that had gotten him into trouble. But now that he's not outside anymore because he's been separated from the rest of the humans because of the fight, and Dr. Zira comes close to him again, he's able to make another grab for the notebook, grabs it, and begins to write. We have one of these ubiquitous gorilla goofily jumps into the cave and beats up Taylor scenes. But when he hands the note back to Zira, she realizes that he's written, "My name is Taylor" on it, and that's the proof that she needs. And then this leads to Dr. Zira and her fiance, Dr. Cornelius, who we learn has some time ago done a expedition out into the Forbidden Zone, which is the Rocky Badlands that the astronauts had crash landed in. And so he has some wacky theories about apes evolving from human beings, which Dr. Zaius thinks is heresy and doesn't like. But the two of them interview Taylor, and he's writing on heaps of scraps of paper. And they begin to believe him, at least part of what he's saying. He tells them about the fact that he crash landed in the lake, and they think that's ridiculous. They don't believe that he came from another planet, or that he flew in a spaceship, because at the level of technology the apes are at, they haven't invented flight yet. But he gets frustrated at this and makes a paper aeroplane and throws it, and then Dr. Zaius bursts in and is like, "What's going on here? You're not meant to have humans outside of their zone." Like, yes, but this is a special case. He's like, "Oh, blah, 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 blah." And he picks up the paper airplane and he crushes it in his hand as another indicator of his wanting to sweep things under the rug and not to acknowledge the true nature of how Taylor is acting.
Something I thought was good though, well, because I was trying to think about why they had such inconsistent technology. Because I mean, they have guns, but they don't have cars.
Yeah,
and they haven't figured out how to fly. They haven't figured out any sort of flight, but then they have power washers and
And they have universities and museums, but again, they seem to be living at like a, almost medieval level in other ways.
Yeah, which I sort of see would be probably it would be something like if the apes did come from the crash, the destruction of mankind, then it would make sense because they would have been able to salvage some of humanity's technology, but probably lost others.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, that would mean that the sacred scrolls that the apes follow are a lot more fake than I assumed the movie was trying to imply they were. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
I don't know.
tricky.
Yeah.
All right, there are two aspects to this. One is that this is an entirely different society than ours, so who knows how that advanced differently in some areas than others. It's entirely an unknown. I don't think it's given that technology would always have to move in the same way. I mean, think about the way that the Mesoamerican civilizations had enormous cities with incredibly impressive architecture, but they didn't even have the wheel.
Yeah.
So there's that there. And then there's also the fact that, the somewhat low level of technology of some aspects of the ape society were due to budget concerns. So originally the ape society was going to be super advanced in all aspects, but that would have been way too expensive, so they got rid of that.
I mean, it does give it a very cool aesthetic.
Yes, it does. I think it works well with what they did, and we can see that it's like the three different reactions to Taylor's coming about that we see. There's Zira, who wants to believe him, is fully on board, thinks that it's for the good of apes if they recognize and find out who he is. She is fully on board. Then there's Cornelius, her fiance, who kind of knows that there's something to this, but doesn't want to admit it because he knows it's going to get them in trouble. So he sort of is like, it can't be true, surely. And then finally there's Zaius, who is just full on, no, it can't be true. But there's, of course, nuance to that, which we will get to later. Dr. Zaius immediately begins to escalate this situation. And there's a plan to castrate Taylor so he isn't going to have any more children. And
Taylor doesn't like this idea.
Of course he doesn't know, but there's a trial that's going to be held to resolve this issue.
No, isn't or he escapes first.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
He has the guards over talking about it, so he then dupes the guard and runs out.
Yeah. But before then, he and the woman who is called Nova or New have been separated, and he's talking to her and she can't understand him. And we get more of the way he's talking to her is pretty crude and nasty in some ways. We get more of an impression of him being a jerk, but he also talks about how he's becoming attached to her through these circumstances that they're in, which is again a character growth for him, because at the very start he said that he left Earth because he had no one that he was attached to. He didn't care about anybody, whereas now he cares about her and he doesn't want to get his balls chopped off, so he makes a run for it.
Yeah. Though this whole chase scene was goofy but also very fun, I thought.
You said something which I thought was hilarious, which is, I hope he doesn't get Harambe'd. Which there's an extended chase scene of the gorillas running hither and yon, to and fro, back and forth, getting tripped over things, jumping over things, running backward and forwards and every which way. And he ends up knocking someone off his horse. They're leaping around. People are throwing things at him. Again, these guerrilla soldiers really don't give off a very well disciplined or organized impression. Now, is this where he runs into the museum?
Yes, and finds that
the human museum, and he hears a bunch of apes talking about some important spiritual leader of theirs in the past who was a gorilla. So that's interesting. That in the past, at least, some gorillas had high position in society, whereas they just seem to be goofy mooks at the moment. But a child ape spots him and keeps on running. He discovers that Dodge has been stuffed.
Yes.
And put into the museum. But he keeps running and is eventually captured. And there's just this overwhelming feeling as he's being captured and hounded that he's being chased by all sides. He's being harried on all sides. People are throwing things at him from all sides until he's finally captured. And then the music ramps up and we get that famous line, "Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape," if I'm quoting it right.
Yes. That was, even though I kind of knew it was coming, it's still a very good line.
Yes, because it's the first time that he's spoken because his throat's healed up. So it's his first words that he's spoken to these apes, which is an aspect of it I didn't know when I saw the clip.
Yes.
Earlier. But yes, this leads into the trial where we have like 3 or 4 different orangutans.
Yep. Well, there was Dr. Zaius.
Yeah.
There was someone else.
There was someone representing the state who has like a funny look to his eyes. I don't remember what their various names were.
I think the one was just called the minister.
Yeah. There was there was someone who was like leading the trial. There was someone who was representing the government. Someone who was representing the religious institutions. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Cornelius and Zero have to argue on his defense. But before they even start, Zero makes the great point that they actually have to determine exactly what the trial's about. And
yes.
Because he's kind of being tried, but then also under ape law,
they have no rights, so they can't be tried.
Yes. But then Zero uses that to their advantage by saying, well, if he doesn't have rights, then surely he can't be tried. And if he is being tried, then that must mean that he has some kind of responsibility for something, right?
Yeah.
It comes to the point where he tries to argue on his own behalf, which is considered totally inappropriate. He can't even do that. And one of the orangutans tries to says, well, if you're so intelligent, then if you're equal to apes, what's our precept to this part of our religion, and what does this part of the sacred scroll say? And he says, well, I don't know your culture, I don't know those sorts of things. And they're like, oh, see, exactly, that proves it.
Which I thought was interesting because he was saying that this was just a farce that Dr. Zaya had just like surgically implanted.
No. They the claim that the orangutans were making was that Dr. Zira and perhaps Cornelius as well had done experiments on his brain to make him smart.
Oh, that's right. Which I thought would be interesting because if they had done that, surely he would know about the sacred texts and stuff like that.
That's a good argument. You should have been on the trial as well. You could have argued in his defense.
But the fact that he didn't know any does mean he's an outsider, meaning that he has had no experience with them.
Yes, that's a good point. It kind of proves his argument because he then writes out on a piece of paper what his story is and asks Cornelius to read it out because he's not allowed to speak on his own behalf. And Cornelius reads out his story about him crash landing in the forbidden zone in the lake and then coming with two companions toward their land. And we have the see no evil, hear no evil, do no evil moment where the three orangutans, one of them covers his eyes, one of them covers his ears. And I forget what the last one is, but yeah,
Covers his mouth.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so that they all do those things, which is a telling moment. But then the climax of the whole thing is his claim that he can't be a mutant, experimental Frankenstein-like creation of the chimpanzees because he had friends of his that were equally capable of speech and reasoning. So they go outside to see if any of those people have been captured, so that he can identify them and they can see if that's true. And so we go out, and the apes ask him, "Well, are any of these your friends?" And he says, "Yes, the tall one in the back." And they bring him forward, and we see that he's been lobotomized. And the music goes like, "Ah, ah!" And Taylor says, "You cut him. You cut his brain out. You bloody baboon."
It's a very tense moment, but that line, I don't know, I find it very funny.
It's good. Well, it's been memed a lot, but yes, that's another moment where the normally not particularly active score suddenly ramps up as you see his lobotomized friend, and he makes a rush for them. This is one of the things which I thought was good about the film is that from what I knew about it, I sort of got the impression that Taylor was really aggressive and unreasonable with the apes and found it difficult to adjust to what was going on. And he was a guy constantly yelling, "What's going on? Why are humans dumb and apes smart? I can't handle this. You can't treat me this way. Ah!" And just like totally not acting in a diplomatic way that would be conducive to actually achieving the things he might want to do and stay safe in this situation. But having seen the movie, he actually acts in an intelligent way for the most part, and his outbursts are understandable when they happen.
Yes, very, very understandable.
So after this outburst, he's has his hands tied, and he has a talk with Zaius. And basically, Zaius opens up to him and says, "Yeah, I know that you're not a Frankenstein experiment. I know that you're some naturally intelligent human being that comes from somewhere." He basically reveals that he actually does believe in what he was accusing Dr. Sierra and Cornelius of doing, basically heresy. He knows that that's true, but he's sticking to his guns on this because he's intent on protecting his people from what he sees as violent, rapacious humans. And so he sees these intelligent humans as being a potentially terrible threat to the apes. And he says a line which I thought was interesting, where he says, "Fort Lauderdale, where you said you got your education. Even in this, you subconsciously revealed the truth. You chose a name that was belligerent." So he's seeing in Taylor what he himself is doing. He himself is saying one thing or secretly being driven by something else, which he knows to be true, but he's putting on something else. So that's why he assumes that Taylor is lying about the crash landing in the lake story.
Yeah.
He's assuming that, like him, Taylor is putting on a front about him innocently crashing into the lake, but that deep down he comes from some community of intelligent humans that are beginning to infiltrate through the forbidden zone into ape society and are probably scheming to invade it in some way. Which is not an unreasonable guess. Again, Dr.
No.
Zaius really does not come across as a villain. He comes across as quite reasonable. He's an antagonist in that he intends to like torture and kill our main character if necessary, and he's lying about things for what he conceives to be the greater good. But yeah, he really does not come across as a villain somehow.
Well, one of the things I thought was which I thought was good about him was the fact that his whole thing of, oh well, you must come from a village and try to inflate, is such a more believable story that
Yes.
which makes it far less I think if he tried to come up with a believable story and this guy's going, oh, I'm going to torture you till you tell me the truth, it would come across worse. But since
Yeah.
his version of it, happening seemed far more believable than what actually happened, you think, oh well, it does make sense why he is going to try to use such extreme measures.
Yeah. And Taylor refuses to tell the real story because there is no real story. He did actually tell him the real story. He did crash land into the lake. And so Dr. Sayer says, oh, take him away then. And the gorillas come and take him away. And as he's being taken away, Taylor says, just remember, Dr. Sayer, you're doing this because you fear me. You're afraid of me. Which is true. But I don't even think Dr. Zaius would deny that. We don't even get a
No.
response to that. But I feel like that's kind of his point. He's saying humans are scary, so I'm justified in doing what I do. Which the obvious sort of racism, prejudice, discrimination, xenophobia parallels here that are being drawn. Much more applicable and reasonable than modern allegories for these things are, because Dr. Zaius is being racist towards humans, but it's not. If there was some movie like this made now, I think Dr. Zaius would probably be much more of a villain and much less of an interesting character. He'd probably just be like, humans are dumb, so they should do our work for us. And I think this is reasonable because I have an irrational belief humans are dumb, because I believe that about them because it makes me feel good about myself to think humans are dumb. Whereas, in fact, Dr. Zaius has an entirely reasonable fear of what human beings might do. And so, even though I think his lying about it is both unnecessary and counterproductive, I can understand why he's doing it, and his character makes sense.
Yeah. I liked it because it wasn't the usual racism bad, because it wasn't just a racist thing. He knew that if there was that group, as I think he says later about how
we'll get to that when we get to that. Yeah. Again, there's also a whole bunch of other heavy-handed allegory things which might have been done if the film was made now, which weren't. So, for instance, we have a scene at the beginning where the gorillas have shot a bunch of humans and they're standing over their corpses with their guns and having a photo taken, which is obviously a big game hunter allegory. But it's not as if the apes are like enslaving humans en masse. And
because that's something I liked.
Do work for them or something. So, which is something that will be done now.
I like that because it's not saying humans are being treated like black people. It's saying humans are being treated like animals.
Yeah.
Which I think someone might fall into a trap of thinking that, because they are all white people.
Yeah. Well, they're all the sort of popular imagination of what a caveman's like. So they're white people, but they've all got dark hair and dark eyes, and they're short and scraggly. They're like again, it's all just to give the impression of a diminished kind of human being.
Yeah.
That is de-evolved, that has gone through some sort of dysgenic process. Idiocracy. That film has happened, and this is the end result.
Yeah.
So Taylor is locked away, and we don't really know what's going to happen to him. But then this chimp who we haven't seen before comes in and begins to talk with the gorilla guard, and then he signals to Taylor behind the gorilla's back to grab him, and then he unexpectedly shoves the gorilla toward Taylor's cage. Taylor grabs him, and the gorilla and the chimpanzee bonks him on the head.
Something I liked about
they're able to escape.
Something I liked about that scene was the fact that but the excuse that the new chimpanzee makes for the reason they're moving
Lucius, who we discover is the nephew of Zero.
Yeah. Is that a whole bunch of social justice warrior chimpanzees have put up a massive fuss about them
I forgot that, you're right.
wanting to dissect Taylor to find out why he's cleverer, and so they've put up enough of a fuss that he's being moved to the zoo, so all these social justice warrior chimpanzees can go stare at him.
That's right, I'd forgotten about that. That was hilarious. Yeah. So we also get more signs of character growth from Taylor in that the chimpanzee's like, let's go. And he's like, wait, no, we're taking Nova with us. The chimpanzee's like, what? That's crazy. That'll make it way easier to get caught. What are you talking about? And again, total opposite from Taylor at the start. He's like, he has no reason to, in all of Earth, all of humanity, there's not one person that he could care to stay for. And then as he said to Nova partway through the film, he's never been particularly attached to any woman, but she's all he has now, and he's sticking by her. So he insists that she comes with them. So the two of them escape, led by Lucius, and it turns out Zira and Cornelius have packed a what do you call it? A carriage, a wagon, something like that.
Yeah.
And they've packed supplies, and they're going to go into the Forbidden Zone to I forget whether the idea is to see whether his story's true or not, or whether it's to investigate his dig site. I think it's to investigate the dig site, right?
It's to investigate the dig, to find proof that that apes were evolved from humans.
That's right. To exonerate them. That's right. Because
to exonerate them, yeah.
Yes, because
Taylor never.
Yeah.
Taylor's not coming back. He's just going to help them at the dig site and then leave.
That's right, because they want to be exonerated from the claims of heresy, because they want to prove their theory right. That's right. Yeah.
Which I always thought was interesting, because I don't think they ever specifically say that they are like anti the religious group.
I don't think they are.
Which I thought was interesting. They're not like these silly religious people that believe that the lawgiver, blah blah blah.
They're reformists, not revolutionaries. They just think that there's something wrong here which needs to be corrected. They don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which again, if this was made now, they would be unlikable characters who want to overthrow their entire society in a way which wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, which I always thought was interesting, because Taylor is a unlikable character that in the end you do actually like. But it seems that in a lot of modern media, they're just unlikable characters that somehow you're meant to like from the beginning.
Yes. So we have more montage travel of them riding into the forbidden zone. They get to a inland lake. I think it's the same one that they crash landed in, but I'm not positive.
No, it's not.
Okay, yeah.
It's a river that leads to the sea that they come to.
And they travel along it until they get to the cave where Cornelius had his dig site, which made him have his theory about apes evolving from humans. But Taylor shaves himself, which makes Zero say that he looks less intelligent, which is funny.
Yeah.
But then, surprise! Dr. Zaius and a whole bunch of the gorillas ride up. Taylor points his rifle at Zaius and says, if there's going to be a shootout, you'll be the first to die, so tell them to back off.
Which I think this is where I realized that Dr. Zaius is not meant to be the bad guy, because he is more than willing to try to
cooperate, yeah.
Yeah. Which I thought was a lot more interesting, having Dr. Zaius just cooperate and go, this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah. So Zaius says, all right. So he tells the gorillas to back off out of sight, and he will go with them, and they will see about whether this theory of the chimpanzees is correct. And Lucius isn't allowed to come into the cave with them because he's too young, so he has to stay outside.
He just has to shoot the gorillas when they try to rush him.
Yeah, well, we don't know that's going to happen yet, but yeah. So they go up into the cave, and again, this is the part I mentioned at the start where something's kind of like a it's like a play, or like the cryo chambers where it's not really explained, and it does, can't quite see how it would work, but it's fine because you understand the point that the story's making.
Yeah.
With it. Because this dig site and the things that they find in it don't quite make sense. Like they find a doll, which you'd think would have definitely I think it might even still have like some of the clothes on it left, which definitely wouldn't be the case after thousands of years. So, but that, again, that's fine. So Cornelius lays out the diggings that he's done, and he explains about how he's been finding remains of humans and apes, and there's signs of humans using stone tools and such, which they haven't used, which they don't use now. But there's a weird situation where the humans seem to have been more advanced in the past and have gotten less advanced over time. And then Taylor points out that there's some glasses and a
pacemaker.
Thank you. I was trying to find.
Not a pacemaker. Artificial valve. Sorry.
Anyway, one of those, but yeah. And he points out that this is evidence of human beings having an advanced civilization on this planet in the past. And they also find the aforementioned doll, and Dr. Zaius says, well, we have human dolls now. And then the doll speaks. And Taylor says, humans don't speak now, so why would an ape create a doll? And you don't think human beings can speak until I came along, so why would an ape create a human doll that could speak? And so we have this back and forth, and Zaius is like challenging the archaeological methods that he's using to date the various things, which, again, at this point in the story, we know that his objections are just him trying to cover up the truth some more. Like he probably, even we can probably figure out that he knows all of the stuff that Cornelius is guessing at is true, but we can know that his objections to the methods that Cornelius is using to date his finds is fake. But I think if this was real, then he would probably then objections to how he's dating the finds would probably be more legitimate. But we also get another big sign of growth from Taylor, where Taylor is using the evidence here to fervently argue about how advanced humans were, how worthwhile they were, how they're not inferior to apes. And again, all of this is drawing a comparison with the start of the film, where he is very down on human beings. And actually, an ironic line near the start of the film, which I forgot to mention, which is very important, where he says part of the reason why he left Earth in the first place was out of a desire that there's some other race of beings out there that have things more figured out than human beings. Basically, that he could have more faith in than humans. But now, in this dig site with Zaius and Cornelius, he's arguing about how worthwhile humans are and how they're not worse than apes. And he's very much changed his position. Then we get some shots fired, and they rush back outside to find the gorillas have stolen their food and supplies, and they're wrestling with Lucius, the nephew, and he's firing the gun off into the air, and they take the gun off him and beat him on the head. And this is just the pinnacle, the cream on the cake, the climax of the gorilla stupidity that we've seen throughout the entire film, because Zaius specifically told them to stay back, and I don't see any signs that he gave them orders to, because he didn't know what was going to happen when they showed up to confront Taylor, surely. So he couldn't have given them secret orders to, all right, we're going to show up, Taylor's going to point a gun at me, I'm going to agree to cooperate with him, I'm going to tell you guys to go hide, you go do that, but then about 15 minutes into it, you're going to sneak back and try and steal their stuff. Surely that couldn't have been what happened.
I didn't
so
get
these
why
gorillas
they decided to steal
on
their
their own,
stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
surely it'd be better to try to get a drop on them if they're coming out of the cave.
Well, they kind of do. One of them's on the cliff top above, and the chimpanzees come out first, and then when Taylor tries to come out, one of the gorillas on the cliff behind them shoots at Taylor and forces him to hide back inside the cave. But tricks the gorilla by signaling for the chimpanzees to do one thing while falsely telling them to do another, and then grabs Zaius and uses him as a hostage again. And again, I'm just thinking to the gorillas, like, come on, guys. He has Zaius as a hostage this whole time. If you care about Dr. Zaius, why would you attack again? But whatever, they do.
Like, I didn't quite get that either, because surely if they heard gunshots, what's the likelihood of like, oh no, they've killed our cousin, oh, I'm just going to shoot Dr. Zaius and then we're going to have a shootout here.
Yeah, you'd think that would be a reasonable reaction. I don't know, whatever. The gorilla's back off again, and he ties up Dr. Zaius in a way which even now the chimpanzees are Cornelius and Zera are shocked by this, like, oh dear.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because he ties Dr. Zaius up the way that they had restrained him. And then Dr. Sarah says, you shouldn't tie him up like that. And he goes, why not? Well, it's humiliating. Which I thought was a very...
What do you mean? Like you humiliated me? Yes, but we thought you were an inferior being. Yeah, well, I'm not. I'm Taylor, and I love humanity, and I eat red meat. Oh, you're doing an Alex Jones bit.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't really, but that's like his attitude at this point.
Yeah.
And then, so they're arguing backward and forward as Zaius is tied up about humans versus apes and which one's better and not. And Zaius asks Cornelius to read out something from the sacred scrolls, which he then reads out about how human beings are rapacious and they breed too much and they kill each other and they're the spawn of Satan. And Zaius says, I knew about all of this, and there's nothing in that cave that has made me turn aside from my belief that that is the way human beings are. And Taylor says, there were no weapons in that cave, which is, again, very interesting character arc, because Taylor has always believed that human beings are this rapacious, warlike, unpleasant lot that he has no care for whatsoever.
Yeah.
And yet, now that Zaius is saying the exact same thing, he's saying, no weapons. There are no weapons in that cave.
I think that so that whole thing about there were no weapons in the cave, that makes me think that about the apes getting some of their stuff from the gorillas, the apes getting some of their stuff from humanity, because Dr. Zaius does know of human technology.
Yeah, possibly. But then Dr. Zaius says, the Forbidden Zone was green and lush once. It was made a desert by your breed. And I will, he basically says, I will keep our people safe from you. And then Taylor's like, well, maybe not. But anyway, I'm leaving regardless. And no one should come after me because I know how to handle this. And he gestures to his gun. And Zaius like, I'm sure you do. Which is, again, a weird dichotomy where Taylor is like, what? We're not warlike? That's crazy. Also, I'll shoot anyone who comes after me because I'm really good at fighting and killing people.
You're right, I didn't notice that, actually.
So then he goes to ride off, and then the gorillas immediately chase after him. Which, they may have their faults, these stupid gorillas, but at least they're keen. And Zaius says, no, don't go after him. No. He needs to go find his destiny. And Cornelius is like, well, the truth is going to come out, right? And Zaius like, no, we're going to dynamite the cave and it'll all be buried. And the truth is less important than us keeping this thing going. So if you think you're going to get away with not being heretics, you're dead wrong.
It was interesting because it was less of like a happy ending, like everything works out fine in the end. Because
not really.
No, not really. I mean, not even Taylor doesn't really get a happy ending.
No. So he rides off with Nova, and then eventually he comes to the iconic thing which everyone has been spoiled on.
Yeah.
He sees the Statue of Liberty. Damn it! You blew it up! Damn you all to hell! And there's a bit of nuance there, which maybe wasn't intended. Maybe it was definitely meant to be one or the other. But I thought this is very interesting because now that he knows that this place is actually Earth, and he's saying, damn it, you blew it all up, is he referring to humans or apes? Because this is his arc, right? At the start, he's like, humans suck. And then he experiences a whole bunch of discrimination and difficulty with apes, which causes him, like in a reflexive fight or flight way, to reject his cynical attitude, right?
Yeah.
And then right at the end here is him seeing the fact that it's all that Earth has degenerated so badly. Is he suddenly realizing that his original proposition, that his original view of human beings was right because we nuked each other to death or something like that? And that Dr. Zaius is actually right, and he's saying, damn you, you blew it up. You have disappointed me once again, human beings. This hope that I had that you were better than I thought, that was just like an reaction to the way that apes were treating me. I now see an ultimate example of the truth of it. Or is him saying, damn you, is that him doubling down on his instinctive pro-human sort of us versus them fight or flight reaction that he's had dealing with these apes, and he's saying damn you to the apes for taking over the planet?
Yeah, it's interesting because you could say it was either way. There's no real definite. Yes, it was definitely that, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
one of the things that really stuck with me after I watched it was the fact that he was it he I had the thought in my head. Dr. Zaius, he is very much like he comes across as very much like oh just I could see people might try to say like he's just like another religious leader trying to keep power for himself. But
Definitely not. I think
he-
if you're taking some sort of self-serving political power interpretation of Dr. Zaius, I feel like you're totally missing the mark.
yeah, well, I sort of what I was trying to get at was that is quite a I could imagine that could be
Yes,
quite a
you're
common
definitely right that would be a very common interpretation that people would naturally want to go with.
yeah, which have done a lot. But Dr. Zaius, even though he kind of knows that the sacred scriptures are not
Scrolls.
scrolls
Yeah.
aren't fully correct, he does 100% believe in them and believe that what he is
Yes,
doing is
I was
right.
going to bring that up as well because he genuinely derives his main view of things, like his worldview, is actually completely derived from what the sacred scrolls teach. And yet the sacred scrolls also say things about the origins of apes, which he knows can't be true. So he's somehow able to reconcile those things in his head. Yeah.
But I really liked the movie, especially.
Yeah, me too.
It's a lot slower than a lot of modern movies, and though the prosthetics they used for the actors playing all that monkeys were very good.
I know. Yeah, it really does, for the most part, really hold up.
Like, I suppose people could say that they do have some very weird looking moments, but like most of the movie, I didn't even sort of recognize. Like, my brain didn't recognize them as wearing makeup or anything.
Exactly. I was never seriously taken out of it by the thought that these were just human beings in masks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought there was a small thing near the end where he's trying to teach Nova how to smile, which is that's like a feminist talking point that it's insulting for men to ask women to smile.
Yeah.
And so she doesn't smile. Like none of the human beings smile. They're all just crazed animalistic creatures. And then he's teaching her to smile. And then so toward the end, she's smiling at him because it's what he wants her to do. But it's clear that she's not actually. He's like smiling with her eyes. She's just smile.
Yes.
Kind of funny.
I thought Taylor's character starts off seeming very emotionless and not emotionless, but not at all empathetic to any of the characters.
He's extremely disinterested.
Yeah, and then in the end, he has sympathy for even the very base animalistic humans.
Yeah.
Because I still got the feeling that the whole thing of tying Dr. Zaius up like they did the monkeys was trying to show Dr. Zaius how it felt. Like this is what you do to my people.
Yes, I didn't pick up on that, but yes, you're right. He's again. This is my interpretation of Taylor in that he has all of these cynical, uncaring attitudes, and Planet of the Apes is basically the story of someone with this nihilistic, uncaring attitude coming up against a situation in which there's a group conflict, fight or flight response that he's forced to deal with. And in that kind of situation, he can't continue to hold his views, even though the evidence for his original belief that human beings were venal and violent and unpleasant is like more proven than ever.
Yeah.
It's like the evidence for that like is far stronger than it was back when he left Earth, but yet he like changes his mind on it. Not again exactly, not because he's seeing evidence to the contrary, but because the situation that he's forced into means that
worldview.
that belief is no longer workable for him, which is maybe a subtle theme of the movie, considering that for Dr. Zaius, the idea of apes sort of stepping into the shoes of human beings and apes being second, apes not being the firstborn of children of God made in God's image, but just being the people that are just stepping into the place of human beings.
Yeah.
That idea is one that he can't on some level fully accept, despite evidence to the contrary. So yeah, I think there's an interesting thing there about people sort of acting in ways that they know, sort of like proclaiming certain things to be true and acting in ways as if certain things were true, even when on some level they know they're not. Yeah, pretty interesting. And not the kind of thing that I was expecting this film to tackle.
No, I don't know. Before I watched this, I'd always got the impression that it was meant to be like this goofy, like, unintentionally funny, sort of like like early 70s, like look at the Bad Monkey Effects movie. But
yeah, I mean, my impression was always just that it was super heavily reliant on the twist. Like the whole point of the film was the twist. Which, don't get me wrong, the point, like if there is any theme to be found in the film, like obviously the twist ending is super important in that theme, but it's not just that in the way that I thought it was.
No. I mean, the twist does definitely make it better, and I can imagine the movie would be so much better if you didn't know the twist, but...
Yeah, I was thinking as I was watching it that if I didn't know the twist, I think I'd probably be taken in by it. I think I legitimately would have not seen the twist coming.
Yeah. But then the twist itself was not bad, like, not... It's not. It's less of like a haha. It's more of a like an ah.
I was about to say the exact same thing. Yeah, it's not a gotcha. It's like a oh, yeah, right. But yeah, a surprisingly good film, and I think if there's nothing else that you want to say, we'll call it there.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything else for me to say. I'd highly recommend watching it.
Yeah, same. I have mixed feelings about the sequels with Andy Serkis.
Well, there's also the sequels.
But they're quite different. They deal with quite different themes, really.
There's the prequels.
Yeah, that's right. There's there's a direct sequel, and then there's prequels, and then there's the Mark Wahlberg version, and then there's the modern sequels with Andy Serkis.
Yeah, because there's also let me find it. There's a list. There's a list.
The sacred list.
The sacred list. Somewhere. Here. Is that it? No. I know it's like Beneath the Planet of the Apes, I think it's called. Yeah.
Yes, I think that, yeah.
1970 is Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Then a year later, there's Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And then there is Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. Probably won't watch those, though.
No. It's got some of the original actors, but I don't think it has all. I think it's a lot goofier.
Yeah, and apparently the effects are worse also.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. Good film.
Good film.
Recommend it. And yeah, we'll see you guys later.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.